My name is Wayne Ottinger, and this is a collection of material that I've made quite a few slides of, and it's my collection pertaining to my 2 years spent 1960 to 62, 2.5 years as the X-15 propulsion engineer at NASA Flight Research Center in flight ops. And I have a couple of websites here at the bottom with my contact information, which I'll get to later on in the program. Just a couple of slides here on my short bio. I've shown here the pictures of the F-104, B-58, F-11, 1F, and the Regulus II missile. These were all projects I worked on as a first half of that 1956 to when I first arrived at Edwards to 1960 when I joined NASA with Jim Love. But those projects I worked on in that period, the first half was for General Electric flight test, and the second half was for Chance Vought, and a short assignment over in Phoenix with Rocket Power Talco on ejection seats. My additional experience in the 70s and 80s was organizing and running workshops for the California Energy Commission, providing technical films for the Navy on the surface effects ship program, and founded and managed 2 nonprofit corporations. And I was also in the, starting in 1963, January, I moved to Buffalo, worked for Bell Aerosystems in Niagara Falls as a project engineer on the Lunar Landing Research Vehicle, and then came back in April of 1964, and we flew the first flight of the LLRV in October 30th, 1964, 6 months after we got it delivered out of Bell in parts and pieces. The LLTV was a follow-on. I had joined Bell Aerosystems as the technical director on that program in June of 1966. Just before Joe Walker was killed in that midair with a B-70. And back in 2007, Neil Armstrong asked me to help him with a SETP paper he was delivering at the end of September. So I went over and had lunch with him, and I had already gotten the U of A and Arizona State University to sponsor a conference. Neil thought it was a great idea, and we held it in March of 2008, and that resulted in NASA JSC initiating a trade study for NASA DFRC to perform, and then I've assisted them as a SAGES consultant, and also done consulting for Orbital Sciences in Chandler on a new generation LLRV and LLTV. The last December, I was able to get Neil Armstrong and Gene Cernan, Harrison Jack Schmidt, and John Young to come to Houston, and the 4 of them and myself briefed the Altair project. NASA DFRC had representatives there, and also other NASA centers had sent representatives, and we briefed them on our training experiences from the 1960s. And just a year ago, formed another nonprofit to target collection of personal collections of important technical data that didn't make it into the government archives. So far, we've got about 25,000 pages of LLRV and LLTV documents, and recently got another collection out of Dean Grimm's basement out in Denver, and it's setting up at the Colorado University in Boulder, and it spans all the way from Mercury to Skylab and the shuttle. And otherwise, it was headed for the shredder. I think it was 30 or 40 boxes of material. And now I'll start with my X-15 recollections. Joined in April of '60, and within a few weeks, we had a U-2 in the hangar, first time we'd ever seen it. And Joe Walker had to taxi it for the press, having never been in the cockpit before. It got an overnight paint job on the tail to put NASA on it. Eisenhower claimed it as a NASA experiment after Gary Powers was shot down over Russia. Norm Foster and I attended an AIAA meeting in Burbank a few years later, got to meet Francis Gary Powers before he was killed in his helicopter accident. One of my first tasks on the X-15 was to suit up with an inspector, get out on the XLR-11 test stand with the 4 chambers running, and with an inspector look closely at the welded check valves on the injectors to see if there were any LOX leaks. I figured Jim Love was testing me. I went to the XLR-99 school at RMD, Reaction Motors, in Danville, New Jersey for a whole month in June of '60. And I served as a non-drinking driver for Tom Raskowski and John Reeves as we visited every bar in a 30-mile radius after school every night. One of the early experiences with the LR-11 flights on the X-15, I can remember 3 flights in a row that we had one of the engines shut down. That would be 4 cylinders on one engine, always shutting down in a left-hand turn. And we finally had to ground the airplane and take the structure apart, find the wire bundle all the way back from the cockpit to the engine bay. And we finally had found a bare wire, 1 wire hidden in the bundle next to a bulkhead, which was coming out and shorting where it was bare and causing the engine to shut down. I can remember a lot of delays for critical parts that we needed in the engine control box, such as improved pressure switches with gold plating. And they were giving us fits, and I would track down the vendors and get the skinny on delivery and then curse Bob Bradford and Billy Arnold over the UHF link. And I don't know if it was FRC to Beatty, but it was which end I was on, but they were on one end, I was on the other, for giving me the company or USAF line to me, and I got chewed out by my boss, Perry Rao, for using foul language on the radio on the UHF, said it was against the law. My hassling Arnold and Bradford and Jerry Brandt earned me the name of Murphy after Murphy's Law. Probably earned the nickname with a few boners I made as well, but can't remember what they were since I've made so many since then. My most proud accomplishment was the coating machine, which was named Murphy's machine at the time for the replacement of the fragile rockite coating. I should mention that RMD used the rod-fed rockite application method on the original build of the engines, and this was before the injector was ever welded onto the face because they couldn't get the rod-fed spray machine through the chamber to coat it with the injector welded on. So when we started losing rockite in the field, and we couldn't afford to have the ammonia leaks when the stainless steel tubing would crack for loss of the coating due to the heat, Bickle asked me and Al Covington to try and get a solution for it, and we started visiting labs around, came up with a plasma arc spray with gradated coatings that could improve the quality by putting pure metal on the surface and then gradually adding a few thousandths at a time the ceramics until you got out to a pure ceramic at the flame front. And the most significant part for this was that the gun was small enough to go through the throat of the nozzle, so we wouldn't have to disassemble the engine. So I dreamed up a pantograph machine, got it designed around a jet engine rollover stand for rotation of the entire engine as on a lathe, and built up in a couple of months with 12-hour, 7-day shifts at work, 10 of us working on it. Clint Johnson tried to get a NASA patent on it, but there was a similar but smaller pantograph machine in the 1920s used for coating incandescent light bulbs. Guess we took some business away from RMD, but with 8 engines losing rock-eyed fast supporting 3 airplanes, we did make a real contribution to keep them flying. When Bickel would not ground the X-15s when we came back from flights with the second stage igniter pressure transducer lines blown or detonated, and RMD and the Air Force were slow in getting a diagnosis and a fix, I did get permission to have Rebel's crack machinists to fabricate a half-inch thick sphere made into several pieces so it could be inserted around the lines and igniter and assembled with clamps so we could at least hope to mitigate in-flight damage. We flew with that till the problem could be fixed, which was after the PSTS blew up, as I remember, which got the Air Force moving quicker. My other memory is one that Milt Thompson wrote about in his book, At the Edge of Space, pages 79 to 80, which I'm going to show you. And this is the autograph page in the book that he signed a couple of weeks before he died in August of 1993, on the day that they were to have a big roast, and they went ahead and had the roast that night for him, people coming in from all over the country. But I was in Milt's office when he was signing that book for me, and he had me read these pages, and I was amazed when I read it at the license that he took. I crossed out the top of page 79 that had nothing to do it, but I won't take time to read all of the text in the book, but basically the story was that he said we had jumped out in the after the engine had started, that we'd opened the lid of the pillbox, in which we'd have been dead instantly had we done that due to the acoustics. But he said that he was recalling having witnessed my coming out with my headphone cord still connected into the pillbox, and when I sheared off the plug when I came to the end of the cord trying to get out of the ammonia because our breath was cut off, and it was so I'm going to go to the next page here, in which Larry Barnett and I were in that pillbox with a couple of inspectors. They had full suits on, and they were out on the airplane. And there had been a malfunction shutdown on the engine. And so with the engine shut down, we went out to inspect it for leaks, or they did. And I was still in the bottom of the pillbox, and we had a big ammonia leak in the ground support equipment. And we had a little water in the bottom of the pillbox, and ammonia really goes for water and in the low areas. And of course, we were 6 foot below the ground level in the pillbox, and Larry was standing at the top of the ladder, and so we each had filter masks. That's all Larry and I had, whereas the inspectors had full suits on with full oxygen. And so they didn't get bothered by the ammonia leak, but Larry and I did, and our breath was cut off. And as I remember him falling on top of me, as he was coming down on top of me, I flipped my headset flipped my filter mask over my headset. And then Larry and I passed each other 3 times going up a 6-foot ladder. And we came out loping into the air every other steps to get as high as we could to get some breath back. And then I came to the end of my cord and broke off the connector in there. And it made me do this flip, and I can't... Milt and I both have the same recollection that I never missed a stride. He says I fell on the ground. I don't remember that. But at any rate, Milt was with, as he says in his book, he was with the producers for the X-15 movie that was going to be made in the next month or two. And so they were witnessing a ground run and what it was like. So we put on a good show for them. And then I say here at the bottom, we had an idea of putting in a manifold and quick disconnects with little egress bottles on the belt of the people that weren't going to have full suits on. And I don't know if it ever got done or not. It wasn't long after that I went to the LLRV. Then another story I can remember is the August, I think it was August, hot day when Joe Venzel allowed the B-52 to come and land without jettisoning the propellants, because there was an engineer that thought that the loss of telemetering was just a disconnected plug in the equipment bay behind. And so when they came out and landed with a full load, not having jettisoned anything, the B-52 blew every tire in the on the airplane, and the lower ventral was kissing the ground and kissing the runway, and they just made it off the runway and stopped. And turned out there was an equipment fire in the electrical fire in the equipment bay behind the cockpit, so we couldn't put any power on, and so we just had to get all this propellant off, 1,000 gallons of LOX, 1,400 gallons of ammonia, and 100 gallons of peroxide, and had to get all that off safely and with no electric power. And with it fully loaded, we had stress panels on the structure on the X-15, which could not be removed with a full load. And that was blocking our access. But I can remember bringing drawing files down, setting up lights. We were there late figuring out how we could get those propellants unloaded. Fortunately, we got it safed out, but I don't believe we ever made another abort whereby we didn't have to jettison the fuel. The other memories of the high range operation, we would alternate TM launch stations crews between NASA 1 at FRC and Beatty or Ely. The uprange launch TM station would be in command of the launch, and the control would then pass to FRC at NASA 1 as the flight progressed downrange within communication range. I never made it to Ely, but was at Beatty many, many times. When flight cancellations occurred for weather or technical problems, we rescheduled for the next day. We did not return to Edwards due to the round trip time, so we'd stay overnight. We rarely stayed at the only hotel in Beatty, and which was 115 miles or so north of Vegas, and avoided the only motel north of town where the Greyhound bus stopped at the brothel. Instead, we would pack the station wagon full and head for Las Vegas, about 115 miles south, get 1 or 2 rooms to be shared by 8 or 9 people, and hit the casinos and lounge shows, usually taking in a dinner show as well. The trip back to Beatty for an early launch required the windows to be down for ventilation for most of the time, with a liberal amount of aspirin or whatever to be on the consoles ready for a flight. The transportation to Beatty was sometimes handled by the FRC R4D Goonie Bird, which was the most comfortable way to travel. But usually the Air Force C-130 with a fire truck and a NASA Jeep, the paramedics and the TM crew would take us from Edwards into a 2,000 dirt strip on a mountainside south of Beatty. The Beatty TM and radar crew would pick us up. Going into Beatty, the NASA F-104 weather reconnaissance flight would find us on the mountain dirt road and come in behind our vehicle very low and initiate a vertical climb right over the vehicle, lighting the afterburner on top of the vehicle. Our 3 a.m. waiting room for the C-130 was in the barbershop at base ops, where frequent delays would result in long games of pinochle or hearts. We'll keep the Las Vegas stories mum, but we always had an X-15 pilot with us on the TM ground control crew. They acted as the primary comm to the pilot. I'll tell one story, though, that I didn't write about, and that was, I have to admit, we might have been known as litter bugs in those days, but I can remember Dick Day and I in the back third seat of the station wagon with the tailgate down, and it was our job to get rid of the beer bottles. And so Perry Rao was driving, and I think that he must have been doing 80, 90 miles an hour, which is typical on those lonely desert roads out there in Nevada, and anxious to get to Vegas anyway. And so anyway, on one of our discharges, the bottle hit a road sign. Perry didn't know it. He thought it was a blowout. So he made a command stop in a hurry from about 80 or 90 over on the dirt, all because he thought it was a blowout. So let's go to the next slide. Esther and I took a trip into Niagara Falls in 1999, and I happened to get a chance to take this picture of Jack Russell's plaque in the Hall of Fame. It was housed in Amherst, New York. Of course, Jack was the head of our rocket shop at FRC, and originally a Bell employee on the early X-1 days and NACA days. And anyway, I wanted to share that. This is a shot in June of 1960 of the training class. This is some PSTS personnel at RMD on the workbench, and that was the XLR 99 training class. Here's a nice shot of the X-15 pilots. It's got Monday Morning Hangover on the title on the NASA print. I can't identify, and I probably shouldn't, who they were. Here's another picture of the 6 of the 12 X-15 pilots, of which there's only 4 living today. Another shot of X-15 pilots plus 2 or 3 others that were not flying the X-15. I can see Neil on the left, Joe Walker, and I see, it looks like Butch on the right, Bruce Peterson in the center. Here's Joe Walker, and here's Neil Armstrong, and Bill Dana, and this is Michael Adams, who was the only pilot lost in the X-15 due to number 3, I believe it was, that crashed. And we lost the pilot. Another pilot shot in front of the FRC. And here's Paul Bickle, who was our leader that really set the example. Had come over from the Air Force. Bob Hoy and Johnny Armstrong were flight planners on the program from the Air Force as being a joint program. Here is a picture of Vince Capasso and John Reeves getting an award. I believe this was for an automatic checkout card on the engine. And here's the crew chiefs, the X-15 crew chiefs lined up. This is a shot of Norm Foster, who was the pressure suit rep, and had later founded Space Age Control in Palmdale. He had retired, sold his business in Palmdale. Esther and I visited him in Worcester in 1999 on the same trip we made into Niagara Falls. Here's some clips I got out of the X-15 movie, which I think most of us went down and attended in 1961 on the premiere. But Dick Day is over on the extreme left, and then you can see Bill Albrecht and I've got a cigar in my mouth. And here's John McTeague and Bruce Peterson. The rest of the bunch are actors. And here's John McTeague and Bruce Peterson again. Dick Day and Ron Waite. And here's Ron Waite again. And John Palmer on the left, who was a young second lieutenant from the Air Force on assignment to flight ops. And Jim Love over on the right. and the rest are actors again. There's Charles Bronson, the lead man, and Mary Tyler Moore. It was her first movie, the X-15 movie in 1961. Another shot of her out of that movie, and a shot they took staged. And here's one for my 15 great-grandchildren and 19 grandchildren, including Esther's. And it shows Mary Tyler Moore starring, and it shows me co-starring. So that's for my grandkids. Here is a shot, I believe, taken, I took it myself, of the chamber in the engine, or the chamber of the engine installed in the mock-up out in front of the Flight Research Center. And here's my Murphy's machine, and this was a shot furnished by Rudy Wagner, who was the technician from the Air Force that worked on the machine. These shots I just got from NASA DFRC here recently, and they dug them up. But this is the jet engine rollover stand, and you can see the engine is wrapped in plastic. And the another shot with, you can see the gun near the throat area, and the operators watching the coding. Here is a here's a scan of a technical paper that I found scraps from, showing the spalling of the rockite in the engine chamber. And then this is one that shows the gradation layers in the bottom half of that picture, where we can lay in different combinations of metal and ceramic. And these are off of a film that I'm going to show in this DVD. Later we'll have some films, but it's taken down on Sepulveda Boulevard at Plasma Coat. And we took the engine and machine down there and did the first coating down there. And then once we did that, we turned it all over to the power plant branch, to Jerry Brandt and the Air Force to continue with once we got it demonstrated. Now this is the mural that's in the DFRC lobby, and Robert McCall mural shows the X-15 and a lot of other stuff. And this is the one of the graphics used to show the mission profile, and the model that was shown in a sandbox model, which was pretty good. Showed the B-52 launch and the X-15 trajectory in 3D, and the C-130s orbiting with the paramedics and fire truck and the Jeep that NASA had for recovery. This is an aerial shot of either Ely or Beatty. I can't figure out which. Somebody else may be able to, but they're very similar installations on a mountaintop for the telemetering and communication. And I don't know, this doesn't look like it might be in at NASA 1, it might be, but I see an NACA thing on it, but it's the control room. And what you saw more of in the movie shots. There's a plotter board showing the method of tracking it. Here's a hangar shot of the X-15, and the engine is on a stand behind it, ready to go in. And here's a few clips from Bill Dana's SETP movie that he had presented a paper down there with a movie. And got some clips out here showing the problem areas. And here's a scan of Milt Thompson problems encountered, what they should teach us. And this is a PSTS propulsion system test stand with the XR-11 engine in it, and it was used for the lifting body program. And here's a front end view of the rocket engine, 60,000 pound thrust. And my old friend Wendell Stillwell put out this little almost pamphlet-like book, but as a report. And I had befriended Wendell in the 70s down in Santa Monica. And there's the foreword written by Paul Bickle. But I still have that book in my possession. Here is a scan of a disc that was put out for the June 8th, 1989 30th anniversary. And here's the Valley Press with a picture of the attending X-15 pilots, of which there were, looks like 8 of the 12 pilots. And of course, a few were deceased by then. So I think Neil was the only one living that didn't make that. This is the rest of the article in the paper. And there's Paul Bickle and Ralph Jackson, and you'll see the movie of that on the DVD in a few minutes. And these are just shots of the pilots and attendants and the character generator identifying each of the pilots on the panel. And you'll enjoy them. Their little, they each get a few minutes to talk. So I've got that in my collection. And this is a shot of Jim Love, who was there with Betty. And Esther and I were there at that time in 1989. And enjoyed it. Milt Thompson and Pete Knight and Bill Dana. And Joe Engel, Bob Hoy, and Milt. These were all taken at that dinner in 1989. Dick Hallion, Chief Air Force historian, and a shot at the table. And Scotty Crossfield. Milt and the widows of Mike Adams, Joe Walker, and John McKay, or Jack McKay, receiving their awards. Milt, Pete, and Bill. And Walt Williams. And I got to take a minute and tell a story about Walt. He had been director at FRC before Paul Bickle came over from the Air Force as chief engineer over there and took over. And Walt went in to become the Mercury project manager for Project Mercury. And he came in and joined us for a post-flight X-15 briefing. This was some time before Alan Shepard went, because he was reporting on the Chimpanese flight that was launched on the Redstone. And I've forgotten the chimp's name, but he told a story about them having trained the chimp to push certain switches, and he got a banana chip. And they had thought they had exposed him to the various flight environments, but they had forgotten one, and that was that they hadn't exposed him to the escape rocket tower, leaving the capsule after a successful launch. And but the chimp had learned to beat the system, and he didn't have to go through all the procedures that he was trained to do to get his banana chip, because he had a shortcut that he had developed. Well, Walt said that they had the film footage of the chimp during the launch, and when he was getting his banana chips with his shortcut switch procedure, and then when he got to the escape tower portion that he'd been never exposed to, when that thing took off, he got so scared that he started going back and getting his banana chips with the standard way he was taught. So it was a very interesting observation. I always remember that story. And here's the astronaut wing presentation made in 2005. And there's Johnny Armstrong, and gave a nice talk, and John McTeague, and Vince Capasso, and you'll be seeing that. And Neil Armstrong was there at this one, and Bob White, and Joe Engel, and Bill Dana. And here's the chief of the astronaut office, Kent Rominger, giving the widow of Joe Walker, Grace Walker Wiseman, with Joe's wings, and that's Vance Brand on the left. And then Joe Walker's son, Jim, and Sherry McKay Lowe receiving Jack's wings from Kent, and Bill and Judy Dana. And I get to see Bill here next week, I hope, because he just moved into Peoria in a senior facility in Peoria, Arizona, and that's just a few miles from where I live. And here's John McTeague and Betty Love, plus some others in the audience, and Bill and Judy. And there's John and Vince, Bill Dana, and Johnny Armstrong, Neil and Joe. And there's the engine, and the PSTS, Propulsion System Test Stand. And there's the rocket firing, the XLR-99 60,000-pound thrust. Every diamond, shock diamond there is a Mach number. And the hangar shot, and the servicing shot on the wing of the B-52, and here it is, a taxi shot out of the movie. And the launch, I think he's just dropped off the hooks there in that shot. Here's that may not be after launch. This is a close-up before launch. These are out of the movie. And here's a close-up of the logo on the fuselage of the B-52, with a nice little cartoon. And here's the prime before the drop. This is out of the movie because it's got the HD format. And the contrails. And this is out of the windshield of a chase, looking up at the prime. Belly camera shot. And a little later, as it's dropping and getting the engine lit, losing a little altitude till it can get it lit. And there you are through the windshield of the chase as it lights off. And it's taken off with about a 2G forward acceleration. Weighs about 30,000 pounds full of fuel at launch, and with a 60,000-pound engine. It's got a 2G acceleration. There's a contrail, and it moves out pretty fast. This is again out of the movie. These are mixed up, not off the same flight. Here's a shot from the rear camera looking over the fuselage of the control surfaces. And Betty and I used to look at all of these films after every flight. I can't remember. There must have been a dozen cameras, if you count the B-52 cameras, the chase cameras, and the several on board the X-15. And we'd be looking for leaks and whatever we could find on the external surfaces. This is a shot from high altitude looking at the, and there's a nice curvature of the Earth as it's getting up into the 200,000 to 300,000 foot area in altitude. And here's a landing, and the ventral is just dropped. You can just barely see it with this long shot. And the parachute that recovers the lower ventral off the tail. And there's the skids out. And you can see the carryall there that through the smoke flares near the touchdown. Here's the nose gear down as well as the skids. And here you are, touchdown with the skids. And then the nose comes down pretty fast. There's another shot I slipped in. Here's the chase, a nice shot of landing with the chase right by him and the dust rolling. And now here we go to ship 2 with the drop tanks, which added some 30-40 seconds to the burn time so we could get out. The goal was Mach 8, but never quite made Mach 8, 6.7 I think. There's the eyelet on the windshield because we found they found that the windshield would, with the ablative coating, would coat over, so you had to keep one window with the eyelet closed so it wouldn't get frosted over from the ablative coating, and then open the eyelet for landing so we'd have some visibility to get the thing landed. Here's a nice shot with a ramjet showing underneath that was supposed to be tested out to the Mach 8, and there it is. I don't know if that's in the process of dropping the ramjet. I think it is. And there it is, yes. So it's going to be parachuted down. Here's the ablative coating on the same airplane with those drop tanks. And there it is at launch, getting lit off. And this was a model used in the X-15 movie to show the heating on the structure. But that was a model shown with the colors on it. Here's a nice shot with the aft skids down and the nose wheel still ready to drop and come in, and a shot. This was from the movie on the tail end after it landed. And now we start the little mishaps. Some major, most all of them were major. This is a shot of on the top of Scotty's broken back. That would have been with the little engines before we ever got the big engine. I was on Rosamond Dry Lake. The bottom is Jack McKay's Mud Lake. No, that was X-15-3 on the test end that blew apart. Here's a close-up of the broken back on Rosamond Dry Lake that Scotty Crossfield had on the early flights. And this is out of the movie, and this is a series that's starting the there's a pilot in the cockpit. I think that was probably an actor, but it shows the frost on the LOX tank and the run of the engine, and a view from inside the White House, and then the airplane when it blew up, and regulator and relief valve and ground support equipment on the ammonia servicing equipment all combined into failure, but it blew apart right at the aft edge of the wing. These are movie shots. Those were reenacted, of course, but this is a real one showing the airplane, the front part of the airplane with the cockpit severed there at the aft edge of the wing. And when the ammonia tank blew, it shot the helium tank and the cylinder in the core of that ammonia tank into the peroxide tank. The peroxide blew, and that's what blew the airplane apart. There's what's left with the tie down on the back. Now, here's a series of flights in which we had, I think, Johnny Armstrong told me 10 emergency landings uprange, which saved the airplane every time. This is one that went into Mud Lake. What happens with an emergency landing, you can't get the engine running, or it quits soon after it starts, and you've got just 3 or 4 minutes to get rid of 15,000 pounds of propellant. You'll be on the ground, and you got to get rid of it. In this case, this was a very successful one, and it's my favorite shot of the looks like a T-38 tucked in with the X-15, and shows him going into Mud Lake and touchdown and normal landing on the emergency lake bed at Mud Lake. Now this one wasn't quite so successful, but the pilot did live, and there's a shadow taken a few seconds before touchdown, and there were no other pictures, but there's the skid marks of Jack's landing, in which he tipped over at the end. He had lost the nose gear, and the left skid had a fatigue crack in it, and he was heavy. The flaps didn't work, and so he came in and touched down, I think about 400 miles an hour, and within 12 seconds was upside down and had taken that path. These are shots of different angles of the airplane, and as I recall, when the rescue crew arrived to get Jack out, the ammonia was so bad the helicopter had to go in and use the wash to blow the ammonia away so they could get him out. and there's a shot of the headrest into the dirt and the rail at the very top, and you could see they had to cut the hoses so the ejection seat rocket wouldn't fire. Cut the hoses, cut his straps, drag him out through that narrow thing, and he did have some fractured vertebrae, and he did fly the X-15 afterwards after he recovered. However, he had lost 2 inches in his spine, and due to the compression. Here is a shot of the flap actuator showing the failure of the balls there in the bearing on that, and the switch showing in the cockpit that it was actually operated properly. And this is the crane picking it up out of the movie that I had a clip of. This is an igniter, scan of an igniter explosion on the engine. And this last piece is the F-100 that was used in the movie. And it was actually some Air Force footage taken, I think, years before. But as I recall the story, Bill Dana knew the pilot, who was a ferry pilot working for North American out of Palmdale, and was hired to ferry this F-100 back east somewhere from the plant. And Bill had known him in the Air Force, and I think had washed him out on his flight certification or something. And then, but he did get his job as this ferry pilot and had a problem, couldn't handle it. Came into Edwards, and this was a terrible crash that they used in the X-15 movie as a dramatic. But these are stills taken from that. And